All right, let's talk Dallas Cowboys. I'm Nick, and this is our daily Cowboys show. And it is game day, and it is Thanksgiving. And of course, the Cowboys play the Kansas City Chiefs today. And listen, obviously, I know a lot of people out there are spending time with their family and friends and doing all kinds of different fun Thanksgiving stuff. And I certainly will be as well. So today's show is going to be a lot shorter, and it's going to be a lot different. And we're going to start with a little palate cleanser, a little stat of the day, as we always do. But then we're going to talk about Thanksgiving memories when it comes to the Dallas Cowboys. And I want to hear from you guys in the comment section below. What is your favorite or most memorable Dallas Cowboy Thanksgiving moment? I want to take a step back today. Whether 2 people watch this, 22 people watch it, or 222 people watch it, whoever it is, I just want to hear from you guys in the comment section below. Now's the time. Let's talk about Cowboys and Thanksgiving and football and all of the memorable, good, bad, and crazy the Cowboys have had over the years. I want to hear from you guys below in the comment section. But we'll get things started with the stat of the day. Because we're talking about history and memories, I want to give a shout out to George Pickens, courtesy of the Dallas Cowboys Public Relation X account. It was reported he's second in the NFL with 1,054 receiving yards. He is the 5th receiver, the 6th instance in franchise history to reach 1,000 yards in the first 11 games of a season, joining CeeDee Lamb, Terrell Owens, Michael Irvin, and Bob Hayes. That's obviously a very good list. You've got 3 Hall of Famers in Irvin, Hayes, and Owens. And CeeDee Lamb obviously is a star player in his own right, could be the Cowboys' all-time leading reception leader at the rate he's going, obviously an all-pro caliber player. So Pickens, salute to you, obviously, this Thanksgiving. Wish you the best of luck against the Kansas City Chiefs and in the rest of your games with the Dallas Cowboys. Of course, great to start to your career. Great job by Jerry Jones trading for you, and obviously great job by Shoddy and Prescott Lamb, the entire offense, for successfully integrating you into the offense. But credit to you for working hard and becoming a good player for sure. But let's talk about Thanksgiving memories when it comes to the Cowboys, because the Dallas Cowboys and Thanksgiving, they go hand in hand. So I just kind of want to walk through memory lane here and just kind of talk about some of the things I remember that jumped out to me. So the first game that really, when I think Dallas Cowboys and Thanksgiving, I'm going to talk about the Julius Jones game. Drew Henson's first career start with the Dallas Cowboys in 2004. The Cowboys were terrible. They had just gotten smacked by the Baltimore Ravens. They were losing a lot. The promise of the 10-6 season in 2003 had completely vanished. You know, Julius Jones comes back from injury, does some good things against the Ravens. He gets a big opportunity against the Bears on Thanksgiving, has a long rushing touchdown in the first quarter, ends up icing the game late with another score. Big day. The Cowboys win 21-7. It was an ugly game full of turnovers. The Bears' only touchdown was off of a pick six that Drew Henson threw. You can see number 7 right there in the image, in the background of the image with Julius Jones running the football. You know, this was a big game for me because this is the first Thanksgiving as a fan that I watched and I can clearly recollect, right? Obviously, growing up, you know, my dad was a Cowboys fan, aware of the Cowboys. They played Thanksgiving Day games before this that I kind of vaguely remember. But this was the first one I sat down growing up and was 100% bought in, 100% interested in as a young, you know, as a teenager growing up. You're like, hey, I'm really invested in this. Let's go Cowboys, right? And this game really stood out to me because Julius Jones was sort of the first guy that I thought of like, okay, the next generation. He was sort of my guy, right? Because obviously the 90s Cowboys were a little bit before my time. And so I was looking for who's my guy? Who's my quarterback? This was pre-Romo, right? Witten was a good player, but he hadn't become Witten yet. This was before T.O. came into the fold or Des Bryant or any of that. So who's going to be my guy? And Julius Jones comes onto the scene as a rookie in 2004 out of Notre Dame. Kind of a slow start to the season, obviously, with a sprained ankle left him out of a lot of football. And then he had a big game on Thanksgiving. Was the what they call it, the Galloping Gobbler Award, I think is what Fox used to call it back in the day. And he had a monster game. The Cowboys won by 2 scores, got back in the win column. They were in the middle of a 3-game losing streak, I believe, heading into Thanksgiving. And it just felt good. Right, it was a good win, and obviously Julius Jones would go on to have a really nice 2004 season. The rest of the year, of course, the most memorable game being that incredible Monday night comeback against the Seattle Seahawks. But to me, when it comes to the Cowboys in this game, it just felt like a shot of my future potentially as a fan. Julius Jones leading in charge with Drew Henson being the young signal caller. A new era of Cowboys football was upon us. That would not materialize, of course. The Cowboys would go a different direction at both positions. 2 years later, it was Romo doing great things, and it was Jones with Marion Barber, and then Felix Jones, and then eventually DeMarco Murray, Ezekiel Elliott, and now all the way up to today with Javonte Williams, and maybe future young backs like Maffa and Jada Blue becoming the stars of the future. But back then, we're talking 21 years ago now, long time. That's just crazy for me to think about. I was really excited because I thought I had my guy, or at least for one day, I did have my guy at Julius Jones. All right, my next Thanksgiving memory, not necessarily the funnest one. So this is 2015. This was the year the Dallas Cowboys started 2-0, but Romo got hurt against Philadelphia, the game they won very decisively against the Eagles in Philadelphia. They then went on a losing streak that just looked so ugly as they tried to survive without Romo. They couldn't. They got Romo back. They beat the Miami Dolphins and head into this Thanksgiving matchup against one of the best teams in football, at the time the best team in football, the Carolina Panthers. They would go on to go to the Super Bowl that season, falling eventually to the Denver Broncos. And Peyton Manning's last game, Von Miller and DeMarcus Ware had a huge impact. But the Carolina Panthers were big favorites, but no one really knew what to expect. And there was this sign of optimism heading into this game, right? Romo's return. If the Cowboys beat the Panthers, they're back, right? They're going on a run. That was sort of the vibe. That was sort of the energy, right? And going into this game, I wasn't quite sure what to believe, but I was excited for it because at this point, I was living. I had a roommate. It was after college, but he was out doing Thanksgiving. He was with family or friends. He wasn't in the area, and I was by myself in the apartment. Right, I decided not to go home. This was gonna be the first Thanksgiving by myself, and I was excited. I didn't go out and do turkey or anything like that. I got a big old steak because I thought I'm gonna be a little creative here. I got a bunch of steak, and I sat down in front of the TV with this massive hunk of juicy red meat, and guys, it was delicious. I didn't cook it nearly as good as I cook them now. I'll tell you what, a little shaky on the pan fry back in the day. But it was a big moment for me as a young man, even though this game ended up in a total blowout. Just the fact that just watching the Cowboys by myself as an adult, figuring things out in the world on Thanksgiving, far from home at that point a little bit at the time. My parents lived 9 hours away, and my brothers were far away as well. So I wasn't married, I wasn't seeing anybody, so that hadn't come up in my life yet. But it wasn't in a bad way. It was in a good way. I was sort of arrived as a Cowboys fan, right? The first game against the Bears was sort of me becoming a Cowboys fan in some ways on Thanksgiving. This was me arriving as an adult, as a Cowboys fan. And so even though this game ended in just tragedy, I use that very loosely, of course, but in terms of the Romo getting hurt again, I'll say disappointment, not necessarily tragedy. That may be a little harsh, although at the time I felt pretty devastated. Even though the game ended poorly, blowout defeat, effectively ending the season, especially with Romo's injury, I look back on this with a little bit of fondness because it was the first time I was, as an adult, a Cowboys fan on Thanksgiving, and it means something to me. All right, this next one was a fun one, going back to 2006. This is Tony Romo getting his first Thanksgiving start. The promise of 2006, a slow start to that season. The Cowboys were middling around 500. They switched to Romo, obviously go to the Carolina Panthers on Sunday Night Football, come back from 14 points down, beat Carolina 35-14, go on a little bit of a run, beat the previously unbeaten Indianapolis Colts, and head into Thanksgiving and dominate the Tampa Bay Buccaneers 38-10. T.O. has a big day. Romo throws for 5 touchdowns, I believe. Defense, Roy Williams gets a pick, who was one of my favorite players for a long time watching the Dallas Cowboys. But what's special to me is at the time, my older brother, he was enlisted, he was in the Army, and we were visiting him. It was my family, it was my parents, and we were visiting him, and we had Thanksgiving in kind of a weird situation. We actually went out to a restaurant to have Thanksgiving. I've never done that before, go out to a restaurant for Thanksgiving dinner, but we did, and it was fun. It was awesome. It was a good time. It was good to see my brother, who at the time again was in the Army, serving. It was just a different experience. And watching the game in the hotel room, watching the Cowboys win in decisive fashion. One of the things I remember the most about this game is the fact the Buccaneers got up early 7-0. Didn't look good. And I think it's not going to be a happy camper for a long time. But they turned it around, of course. We're up, I think, 21-10 at the half. Went on to coast to a decisive victory as the momentum built for the 2006 season before they fizzled out down the stretch. Of course, it ended in disappointment, as so many Cowboy seasons have in my lifetime, with the Romo fumbled snap against the Seattle Seahawks in the wild card round. But I look at this game and I look at this moment just for the familial connection, right? Being with family, being away from home, visiting family. That's what Thanksgiving in some ways is about. A lot of people view it, I think, correctly as, hunkering down with those around you that are closest to you, or traditions and things like that. And there was nothing about this Thanksgiving to me that was about tradition. Away from home, watching the game in a hotel. We had dinner at a restaurant, right? I don't even remember being a special restaurant or anything. I think it was kind of a run of not like a dump or anything like that, but it's just an ordinary kind of restaurant. Nothing special about it. But it still was a special Thanksgiving. Seeing family, being around family, and of course, the Cowboys getting a big win. All right, this next one here is fast forwarding to 2018. We got a picture of Amari Cooper right there. And you talk about a magical season. And 2018 stands out in a lot of ways to me personally. But the way the season started when it came to the Cowboys, right? Obviously, back and forth, often struggling. They fall to 3-4. They trade for Amari Cooper. They lose to the Tennessee Titans in prime time. They're 3-5, and the season seems over. 2 years ago, they were 13-3, the number one seed. 2 years before that, they were 12-4, magical with Romo. 17 was kind of a lost year because of the suspension with Elliott. Came into 18 with a lot of hope and a lot of promise, and it looked like the Cowboys were going to disappoint once again. Was Prescott maybe not that good? Maybe he was overrated. Maybe Ezekiel Elliott wasn't enough. Maybe this team just wasn't good. Was Garrett on his way out? Were they going to win another game? They had a relatively tough schedule the rest of the way after starting 3-5. But then they got it together. They beat the Philadelphia Eagles in primetime, started stacking some wins, and headed into a big-time Thanksgiving matchup against the Washington Redskins. And I was 100% excited for it, except for one slightly minor detail. I was working at the time. This was the first Thanksgiving I worked currently at the job I had. We were traveling for a trade show. I worked as an engineer setting up a demonstration that we were going to deliver the following week in the trade show. And I had wanted to go. I had signed up for it. I had no problem doing it. It wasn't an assignment that I hated. At the time, I wasn't married, didn't have kids. I didn't mind it. Thought it was like a fun adventure kind of thing. Just, hey, let's see what this is about, right? Went down to Orlando when they have those big convention centers, helped set up, our booth and our demonstration, all that kind of stuff. Sort of an interesting environment. I don't know if any of you guys have ever been a part of the trade show industry and everything that goes into that, but boy, oh boy, is that a whole industry by itself. That is pretty wild to see, just sort of behind the curtain, seeing the sausage getting made when it comes to that stuff. When it comes to the Dallas Cowboys in this 2018 Thanksgiving game, I missed pretty much all of it, right? I think a good friend of my coworkers, was able to pull up the game on his phone while we were at dinner, right? Because we went to a I think it was like a Fuga de Chao, like a Brazilian steakhouse, if I remember correctly. So they didn't have TVs, which I was frustrated about because before the leader of the event, the marketing event leader said, like, listen, I want to take everyone out to dinner who's working Thanksgiving dinner. Where do you guys want to go? And I said, anywhere that has a TV, as long as it's got a TV so I can watch the game. And she's like, I don't really care about where you want to go. What do you want to go to eat? And I said, I don't care. It's wherever there's a TV. And of course, they picked a place where there was no TV. But my good friend and my coworker did manage to put the game up on his phone. Again, this was 2018, a little bit different. There was no, NFL Plus, right? I don't know how he streamed it. I didn't ask questions. But he got it on his phone. The reception wasn't great. And obviously we were eating. And I didn't try to be the worst host of all time, or at least the worst, I'll say, co-worker of all time, as of course dinner was supposedly supposed to be a gift from our marketing leader, and it was, and she was fantastic, and I wish her nothing but the best. She was phenomenal. But as the game went on, of course, the Cowboys kind of in a slugfest back and forth, and then Amari Cooper showed up. And it was one of those things where, because the game was filled with nothing but big plays, Amari Cooper with not one but two long touchdowns, DeMarcus Lawrence with an outstanding deflection interception. The Cowboys went up, I believe, 31-13. They went on to win 31-23. And it's one of those moments that sticks with me because I missed 95% of the game, 95% of it. But I remember those three plays, right? I remember the two Amari Cooper long scores, and then I remember, of course, the DeMarcus Lawrence interception. And Amari Cooper actually had a third touchdown, I believe. He had a monster day. Amari Cooper had a couple really monster games for the Cowboys that season. Remember the Philadelphia Eagles game a few weeks later in Dallas? That was a big one. But the reality was that was a game where you very rarely can you miss a game and you miss 90% of the plays, but you actually catch all the plays that really matter. And I caught them all. I caught the Amari Cooper magic, one of the great moments in Cowboys history. Amari Cooper's 2018 Thanksgiving, even DeMarcus Lawrence, a footnote in history with an awesome interception. The Cowboys defense wasn't perfect. They gave up, I think, a 70-yard touchdown to, I think, Deshaun Jackson when they were up 3 scores to get the Washington Redskins back in the game. But they held on to win and continued to stack momentum as they built eventually a path to a division title. And this one sticks out to me because I missed the most of this game, the vast majority of it. And it's one of the few Cowboys games that I've truly missed since I graduated college, right? Obviously, there's been a couple just life circumstances that have gotten in the way. But this one I just outright missed. And it was on TV. It was prime time, Thanksgiving. If there's a game you 100% almost guaranteed to see every year with the Cowboys, it's Thanksgiving. But I missed this one, or at least 90% of it. But somehow, some way, I had good fortune to at least catch the plays that matter. And that's what I remember about this game. All right, here. And finally, this one was the DaRon Bland record-breaking pick six. Just a couple years ago in 2023 against Washington. Then the Commanders, I believe they were no longer the football team. 45-10 final. The 38-10 was the score before this interception return from DaRon Bland. Magical season for Bland, of course, breaking the record for interception return for touchdowns in a single season. This one was good to me and special to me because I actually watched this. It was with my wife, and it was with my mom and dad. And this was sort of a classic Thanksgiving moment watching the game. Me being a little too stressed out, right? Listen, Dallas should win and win comfortably, and they did. But Sam Howell hanging around Washington, you never know how things are going to go, right? Defense was doing okay, but not fantastic. And they just caught fire late, made some big plays, pulled ahead, just went on a run like they did in 2023, where they just seemed to, be hanging around and then just avalanche teams and bury them at the end, or bury them at least at some point in the game. Whether, they did that against the Rams, against the Patriots, against the Jets, against the Panthers, against Washington, the last game of the season, and of course against Washington on Thanksgiving. But I remember this play because this was the first time I think I've watched a Cowboys game, and America was rooting for the same thing. A lot of people either love or hate the Dallas Cowboys, obviously. That's a cliche, but it's 100% true. People root for the Dallas Cowboys to embarrass themselves. They root for the Cowboys to lose. And of course, Cowboys fans, we root for them to win. That's obvious. But this was a moment because DaRon Bland is an example of a guy who does it right. He was not a top draft pick at all, right? He was not a guy with any sort of hype, any sort of attention. Going into the 2023 season, the secondary was going to be Jordan Lewis and nickel, Stephon Gilmore, veteran outside, and Trayvon Diggs, right? That was the plan. Then Diggs gets hurt, right? Disappointing injury. And then DaRon Bland gets thrown into the mix. And we're like, DaRon Bland, isn't he the guy that had a couple takeaways against Philly? Yeah, 2022, good job stepping up. Is he the guy that got a pick against Trevor Lawrence? Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, he can play a little bit. Didn't he get that interception off that Saquon Barkley interception against the Giants week 1 where Dallas won 40-0? Yeah, he did. We'll see what he can do. And all he did was set the record for interceptions returned for touchdowns in a season, playing at an all-pro level. Should have won Defensive Player of the Year, was totally robbed, in my opinion. But this was a moment because DaRon Bland, at that moment, and even to this day, seems to be the kind of man who does things the right way. He's not about, himself, seems to keep to himself. He exemplifies hard work. He's team first. He lines up where the team asks him to, whether it's nickel, outside corner, zone, man, tackle, off coverage, press. He does whatever's asked of him. Whether he does well on it or not, he just lines up and tries to do what his coaches and his teammates need him to do to win. And he's a guy that you root for. Very similar to Elijah Clark against the Eagles, a guy who's scratched and clawed on special teams, that incredible punt coverage play that just blew up the internet, blew up the sports world Sunday afternoon in the Cowboys' big comeback against Philadelphia. That's a play that will live probably in Cowboys history for that effort, being a special teams guy, undrafted free agent. DaRon Bland was very similar ilk. And in this moment right here, America was rooting for the record. Because DaRon Bland, whether people knew Bland well or not, they understood something about him. He was the kind of guy you root for. He was not Michael Irvin flashy. He was not Captain America Roger Staubach. He wasn't Jimmy Johnson's braggadocious. He wasn't Barry Switzer with his college championship rings. He wasn't Bill Parcells. Wasn't Jerry Jones. Wasn't T.O. Wasn't Romo. Wasn't Dak. Wasn't Ezekiel Elliott. Wasn't Des Bryant. Wasn't any of that. He was just a guy that had been given an opportunity and had ran with it in front of tens of millions of people that season. And he had just had an incredible, magical year. And at that moment on Thanksgiving, in front of everyone settling down after Thanksgiving dinner, we all witnessed history. And DaRon Bland, a player's player, stepped up and delivered it. And to me, that's what sticks out to me about that Thanksgiving day, that game, that moment for the Dallas Cowboys. Sometimes these big Thanksgiving moments, it's about the stars. It's about Cooper. It's about Romo, right? Good or bad. It's about Prescott sometimes, right? Of course. In 2004, it's about Julius Jones. But sometimes, and DaRon Bland is a star in his own right, but sometimes it's about not the big names. It's about the guys that step up and do the little things and take advantage of the opportunities. DaRon Bland did that and has done that in his NFL career, and he's going to make a lot of money. He's going to be a very wealthy guy. Already is. Got a big extension in training camp this year prior to the start of the season. But that moment that you see on the screen right there, that was special. Because DaRon Bland's all of us. He's the guy we root for. He's the guy we should root for. And he made the biggest play I think we've seen on Thanksgiving, at least in the past 15 years, setting an NFL record that probably will never be broken. All right, guys, a little bit earlier this week, I asked a few people to throw out some comments about their favorite Thanksgiving Day memories, so I'm going to go through them right now, but I want to hear from you guys again in the comments section below about your favorite memories when it comes to Thanksgiving. Let me pull up here. First one is from Dabin Dobbins, 5887. Regular commenter, as always. Good to hear from you, Dave. Happy Thanksgiving to you. Happy Thanksgiving to everybody, by the way. I should have led with that. Boy, am I terrible. I don't even lead with a happy Thanksgiving, guys. That's my bad. Oh, my goodness. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. Jeez. That's... oh, man alive. I tell you what. I'm imperfect, guys, but happy Thanksgiving, everybody. All right, David, the original Madden multiple leg turkey. Yeah, that was before my time, but I will say this: I do miss John Madden. Right, I saw John Madden more as the Monday Night Football color commentator than, of course, Sunday Night Football on NBC. I didn't really get a whole lot of him when he was with Summerall. I have, maybe brief kind of glimpses and memories, but not a whole heck of a lot. I think the big thing to me was maybe that Super Bowl Patriots-Rams probably comes to mind for me personally. But boy, Madden was good. He was good in the moments on Thanksgiving because he was a guy that was bigger than like the media, but he wasn't bigger than the game. And it was that perfect duality, right? He made every game feel big, but every player and every connection personal. Whether you were watching him or listening to him or just watching the game alongside of him, it felt like you were next to him in the booth and you were pals with John Madden. At the same time, you were learning from him in awe of a guy who's a Hall of Fame head coach with the Raiders, right? That was John Madden. And I think we all miss Madden. He was probably the greatest color commentator of all time, regardless of the sport. I turn on TV today, you get a lot of these commentators, and I don't want to pick on anybody right now. It's Thanksgiving. I want to be a little nicer about it. But they feel, they make it about them, their opinions, their thoughts, what they think. High energy, low energy, whatever it may be. For John Madden, it was about the game. It was about the players. It was about Aikman. It was about Favre. It was about Emmitt Smith, about Jimmy Johnson. It was about Tony Romo. It was about Larry Allen, right? That's who the game was about when it came to John Madden. And that was special about him. And I think that's why we all miss him. Adam the Wizard writes, I just missed the classic Redskins versus Cowboys Thanksgiving, Romo versus RG3, Dak versus Kirk classics. One thing that I miss that has happened over the last really 5-6 years with Washington is because now maybe they got Jane Daniels, so we'll see what happens. But there used to be must-see TV between Dallas and Washington, right? You brought it up. You got the Romo RG3. You got the Dak Kirk matchups, right? Those were good games. Those were good matchups. Romo versus Eli Manning, right? Those were good, just long-term rivalries. Guys that played together a bunch, played against each other a bunch. The NFC East used to be like that, guys. That's why I love the Jalen Hurts-Dak Prescott rivalry right now. Even though Dak Prescott's played a lot longer than Jalen Hurts, I love the battle they go up against each other because to me, it's actually a real rivalry. Who's going to play quarterback for the Giants? Is it Jackson Dart? Maybe for the future. Jane Daniels looks good, but I'm concerned about his injuries. I think he's a great player. Obviously, playing for Washington's not ideal, but the injury concerns are real. But right now, when it comes to the NFC East, the great quarterback matchups, where are they? It used to be what was so great about the NFC East is you would get these, even if it wasn't elite quarterbacks, you get these great matchups that you knew there was some familiarity, right? Hey, listen, Kirk Cousins, he's going to be ready to play against Dallas. Listen, Eli Manning could be throwing 25 interceptions this season. He's going to throw for 350 and 4 scores against Dallas on primetime. You just know it, right? Donovan McNabb, he carved up the Cowboys for the better part of a decade. Got to be ready. Right? Those matchups and that familiarity. You go to those other fan bases, they'd see the same thing, man. They'd be like, listen, Romo, oh boy, 2007, we got him in the playoffs, but boy, twice in the regular season, yikes, he got us. Or, you'd have Philly, they'd say, listen, 2009, last game of the regular season and the playoff game, Romo, they got us, right? It's and vice versa, 2008, right? When McNabb and Romo played and Romo played like crap and McNabb and the Eagles carved up Dallas, right? There used to be a great familiarity, which made those Thanksgiving Day matchups, particularly against Washington, really memorable. And there were a bunch of them. RG3's monster game, Amari Cooper's monster game. It's 2016, right? Who can forget? Dak's first Thanksgiving against Washington comes to mind. But we don't get those anymore, right? The 2023 one was a blowout. That was Sam Howell versus Dak Prescott. That one's memorable because of DaRon Bland. And that's why I really hope Jane Daniels is healthy and becomes a good player. I want to see those matchups. I hope the Giants become better and Jackson Dart becomes a good quarterback because those rivalry games, those matter. Those make football worthwhile. Going into games against the Giants in Washington with beat-up quarterback situations are just kind of like, it just doesn't have the same magic. It's still a rivalry game. It's still fun. It's still full of juice and energy, but it's just not the same. So I'm rooting for Daniels and Dart to return back to health because I want to see some good rivalry. I want to see some good football like we see with Philly and Dallas. David Moses, 884, and then Anchors Away chimes in as well, saying, me too. Brings up one of the most famous plays in NFL history. The Leon Lett miscue allowing Miami to kick the field goal and win. Not my favorite, but the most memorable. So I can honestly say I do not know how I could have recovered from that one. Now listen, I recovered from Romo's drop snap. Heck, I recovered from Amari Oruwariye dropping the block punt last year against Cincinnati on Monday Night Football. There's been a lot of I've Santana Moss. I recovered from that in 2005, so I'm sure I'm going to find a way to get beyond that. But boy, oh boy, I don't know how I would have been able to do that. I don't know how any of you guys did. I mean, that just is unbelievable. Now, what the interesting tidbit about that game in 1993 is that was the last game that Jimmy Johnson would ever lose as the Cowboys head coach. The Cowboys would win out the rest of the season, and then they would go undefeated, of course, to the playoffs and capture back-to-back championship, beating the Atlanta Falcons in the Super Bowl. They dominated the playoffs. They won every game by double digits. They were eviscerated the 49ers in Dallas despite Romo getting knocked out of the game. Right? They were just better. They were just such a dominant team. And they were better than the Dolphins that day, but just kind of a weird game, a long touchdown run. Obviously, the snow, right, in Texas and Thanksgiving. What a bonkers moment there. It was a crazy game. It was a crazy defeat, and it obviously was one of the most memorable plays. It's replayed every single year on Thanksgiving. Poor Leon Lett will never be able to live that down. Obviously, the fumble in the Super Bowl II, when Don Beebe hawked him from behind, comes to everybody's mind. But that play, that block kick that he touched, I mean, that's something right there too, for sure, never to be forgotten. But I think that's also what makes Thanksgiving Day football so great, because so many of these moments we remember, whether it's Bland's pick six, whether it's Julius Jones, Romo throwing 5 scores, beating Tampa Bay, right? Just these fantastic moments of the Dallas Cowboys, whether they be good or bad, right? There's been some bad. There's been some moments where it's like, man, I want to forget that ever happened, even in good years. Remember in 2014 when the Eagles crushed the Cowboys in Thanksgiving 33-10? Yikes, that was a rough one. And of course, I already brought up 2015, not exactly great. The Bills dominating Dallas, I believe, in 2019 on Thanksgiving. Not a good day right there. And of course, 2020 when Andy Dalton was starting, eviscerated Dallas 41-16. Like to forget that one. And I'm sure a lot of you guys hopefully forgot that one until I just brought it up. And how about the Raiders, Cowboys? Great game, but a disappointing ending in 2021. That kind of great game despite not having Cooper and Lamb that day, but just wasn't enough. Defense didn't do enough to make enough plays. Questionable call on Anthony Brown. I remember these games, guys. I'm sure a lot of you guys do as well. And that's what makes Thanksgiving Day football so great. It's whether it's good, bad, crazy, chaotic, it's memorable. Whether we're at home with our families, whether we're on our own in our apartments, whether we're on the road visiting family, watching the game in a hotel, going out to Thanksgiving dinner, unique place, right? It has just a magical moment. And the Dallas Cowboys in Thanksgiving football, no offense to the Detroit Lions, no offense to now that they have a night game, but there's something special about the Cowboys. We've all eaten Thanksgiving dinner, however you eat it. We're sitting down to watch the game. We're sitting down to watch with the rest of America's team play. And they've got the Chiefs. It's going to be an interesting game, guys. The Chiefs are really good. Should be a fun matchup. And I'm excited for it. And we all are, of course. It's another Thanksgiving. It's another chance at another phenomenal Dallas Cowboys memory. Happy Thanksgiving, guys. I'll see you on Friday.